Out here, on forgotten moons, death can be slow. It can be violent, it can be worse than your worst dreams. To understand these deadly places, we will explore them one by one. On each of the 9 moons, a special and awful death awaits. We will look at the science of the suffering, from what happens to the body to what happens to the mind. Then, we'll give it a score on our death rating scale. A higher score means a worse way to die. Let's start our list with a death that's more lonely than it is painful. Our first stop is at the edge of the solar system, near the dwarf planet Pluto. This is Charon, a world of deep canyons and frozen flatlands. Not much is happening on this moon now, but its ancient history has left scars. Huge canyons, some reaching depths of 9 kilometers, drop for miles into its surface. It's a silent, still world. And for an unlucky visitor, that quiet is about to be where they die. In Charon's weak gravity, the fall isn't fast. It's a long, slow, painful fall into darkness. A person would have minutes, maybe even hours, falling with nothing to see. They would tumble over and over into the moon's frozen heart. A suit would keep them safe from space, but it can't protect them from the deep, heavy loneliness. They would be falling into a blackness so total they couldn't tell which way is up. There would just be the never-ending black walls of the canyon and the sound of their own breathing. Sooner or later, they'd hit the bottom. Or, even worse, they might get stuck in a tight crack, unable to move. Their oxygen would slowly run out over days. The last moments would be spent completely alone, a billion miles from home, a tiny forgotten spot in a frozen crack. It's a slow death that's very hard on the mind, but physically, it's not the worst that space can do. We give this a death rating of 6.5 out of 10 for being an endless void, a slow, mentally painful fade to black. Next, we head inward to the lumpy, potato-shaped moon of Mars, Phobos. This tiny world is doomed. Mars's gravity is slowly tearing it apart, and its surface has stretch marks lines that show it will be destroyed one day. But the biggest danger right now is something harder to notice. It has almost no gravity. Phobos' escape speed is only about 11.4 meters per second. You couldn't just jump into orbit, but a clumsy trip, an accident with a jetpack, or a small push off a ship could easily be enough to send an astronaut on a one-way trip into space by accident. Unlike our last death, there is nothing to crash into. The lost human is now their own satellite, in their own orbit. Their suit will keep them alive for a few hours. Those hours would be spent watching Mars get smaller until it looks like a red marble, and the sun becomes just another star. There would be nothing to do but think about what's happening until the air runs out. It's a peaceful death for the body. No pain, no violence. Just the slow, scary thought of being wiped from the world, floating alone in the endless, quiet sea of space. This earns a death rating of 7 out of 10, awful for the mind, but at least it doesn't hurt. That's no moon. And wait, yes it is. Our next stop is Saturn's moon Mimas, famous for the Herschel crater. This crash scar is 130 kilometers wide, a third of the moon's whole size. The crash that made it almost broke Mimas into icy pieces. At the center of this giant crater is a mountain, and from the top of that mountain, a deadly dive awaits. The mountain in the middle of Herschel crater is a huge 6 kilometers high. That's not as tall as Mount Everest, but it's still a really big mountain. And in Mimas's low gravity, falling from the top would be a special kind of scary experience. The fall would take over 3 minutes. 3 minutes of a quiet, stomach-turning freefall. There would be lots of time to watch the crater floor rush up to meet you. One could do their taxes, think about the meaning of life, or watch their whole life flash before their eyes a few times. The waiting and the feeling of complete loss of control is the real killer here. The end is simple and rough. A very fast crash will break the suit and destroy the body in a second. It's the anticipation that puts this death on our list, earning it a death rating of 7.5 out of 10. The painful wait. A long time to think about the messy end. We now travel back to the realm of Jupiter, to its second biggest moon, Callisto. At first look, Callisto doesn't seem like much, but its surface holds a deadly secret. It's one of the most heavily cratered objects in our solar system, proof that it has been hit by rocks for 4 billion years. And because it has almost no atmosphere, there's nothing to protect you from the constant rain of space bullets. These aren't lasers from an alien ship, they're micrometeoroids. Tiny bits of rock and dust, some as small as a grain of sand, traveling at tens of thousands of kilometers per hour. On Earth, they burn up in the atmosphere. Here, on Callisto, they are super-fast bullets. Just one hitting a weak spot on a spacesuit could be a disaster. Instead of one, imagine being hit by dozens. A suit becomes like a strainer. Tiny, small, impacts all add up to a deadly problem. Alarms would scream as air hisses out of 100 tiny holes. The sudden rough drop in air pressure and exposure to the vacuum of space would be a disaster. It's a death by 1,000 tiny, rough cuts, a reminder that in space, even the smallest things can kill you in the worst way. This receives a death rating of 8 out of 10, a cosmic firing squad that is fast, rough, and completely unstoppable. For our next death, we're going to a place much closer to home, Earth's own moon. We've been there. We've walked on it. But we didn't fully understand one of its sneakiest dangers, the dust. It's not like the dust on Earth. It's called regolith, and it's nasty. Because there's no wind or water to smooth it down, moon dust is made of tiny, sharp, glass-like particles. During the Apollo missions, astronauts felt effects like sneezing and sore throats, a problem they called lunar hay fever. But that was a mild reaction. What happens if that dust gets inside the lungs for a long time? Studies using simulated moon dust show it can be poisonous to human lung and brain cells, tearing them up and causing severe inflammation. For this scenario, a broken air filter decides the victim's fate. Over days, the fine, sharp dust builds up in the lungs. It's like breathing in finely ground glass. Every breath becomes a struggle, tearing at the soft tissues inside. The lungs would slowly fill with fluid, leading to a painful death from choking, internal bleeding, and lung failure. It's a slow, painful death from the very ground beneath your feet. This is death by a million paper cuts, earning a death rating of 8.5 out of 10 for being slow, inescapable, and painfully internal. Leaving the inner solar system, we go back to the domain of Saturn. Our stop is its largest moon, Titan, one of the most interesting worlds we know. It has a thick atmosphere full of nitrogen and liquid on its surface. But this isn't water. It's liquid methane and ethane, which make huge lakes and seas at a freezing -180 degrees Celsius. Falling into a lake of liquid methane is a nightmare in two parts. The first is the cold. It's a cold shock so strong that without a suit, a person would be frozen solid in seconds. But let's assume there is a suit. For a moment, the huge temperature difference would cause the suit's materials to become brittle and crack. And that's when the second part starts. Titan's air has almost no oxygen, but a spacesuit is full of it. As the freezing methane leaks through the cracks, it mixes with the oxygen. While methane and oxygen don't ignite just by touching, this scenario is terrifyingly plausible. All it takes is one spark from the suit's broken electronics. The result? A catastrophic explosion. The last moment would be a flash of light and heat, an explosion inside the suit that would both cook and shatter the frozen body simultaneously. It's a horrifying mix of two of our deepest fears, freezing and fire, giving it a death rating of 9 out of 10, the cryo detonation. We stay in the area around Saturn for our third worst death, visiting the small, bright moon of Enceladus. This world is famous for the huge geysers shooting out from its south pole. They blast water, ice, and steam from a subsurface ocean. It sounds beautiful, maybe even promising for finding life. But these plumes hide a deadly secret. They are a toxic mix of chemicals. The Cassini spacecraft found a nasty cocktail of chemicals in these geysers, including methane, carbon monoxide, and even hydrogen cyanide. Getting hit by a blast is a multifaceted attack. The force would be like being hit by a frozen tsunami, burying someone under tons of ice. Claustrophobia would hit instantly. But being buried is the lesser of two problems. The real danger is the gas. While the exact concentration is unknown, a significant amount of something like hydrogen cyanide leaking into a suit would be a death sentence. The victim would become confused, then pass out, their bodies shutting down as the poison gases stop their cells from using oxygen. Death would come while trapped, buried alive, and poisoned, all at the same time. This trifecta of horror earns a death rating of 9.5 out of 10, the buried, poisoned, and frozen. For our second worst place, we travel to the coldest measured object in our whole solar system, Neptune's largest moon, Triton. With a surface temperature that drops to an amazing -235 degrees Celsius, Triton makes even the coldest winter on Earth feel like a beach vacation. The surface is a wide, crystalline expanse of frozen nitrogen, methane, and carbon monoxide. On Triton, even the best spacesuit is pushed to its absolute limit. The suit's components become brittle. A small, silent breach is all it takes. The thin, super cold nitrogen atmosphere leaks into the suit. What happens next is instant and horrible. The moment the -235-degree cold touches the skin, the water in the cells would flash freeze. A wave of solid ice would propagate through the body in seconds. Blood would turn to a solid block. The lungs, full of warmer, moist air, would crystallize in an instant. There wouldn't even be time to scream. The body would simply become a statue. A perfectly preserved, but grotesque, frozen statue. A monument to the absolute, cruel cold at the edge of the solar system. This is the human ice sculpture, with a death rating of 9.8 out of 10 for being unimaginably fast, brutal, and final. We have arrived at our final stop, the absolute worst place to die in the solar system. We are back at Jupiter, visiting its king of moons, Ganymede. It's the largest moon in our solar system, bigger than the planet Mercury. It even has its own magnetic field, but that magnetic field is tiny compared to Jupiter's. Ganymede is trapped deep inside the giant planet's fierce radiation belts. The radiation on Ganymede's surface is around 8 rem per day, an amount that could be lethal in a few months. But this story is worse. What if someone is on the surface during a perfect storm, a massive burst of energy from the sun that supercharges Jupiter's already powerful magnetosphere? The intense rush of powerful particles would overwhelm a spacesuit. The radiation would start to break down the suit itself, cooking it from the outside in. The electronics would fail, leaving the person in darkness. They would feel a burning sensation all over their body as the radiation bombards their cells, causing acute radiation sickness to set in with terrifying speed. And then comes the end. The weakened suit fails completely. It bursts open. The result isn't the myth of bodies exploding, but something worse. Explosive decompression. The air in the lungs expands violently, causing massive trauma, and the low pressure causes the liquids in the body to boil. It is the agony of being cooked by radiation and torn apart from the inside by the vacuum of space, both at the same time. We give this a death rating of 10 out of 10. The irradiated void is the clear winner for horrible space deaths. From the lonely canyons of Charon to the radiation-blasted plains of Ganymede, we've seen that dying in space is much scarier than just floating away quietly into the dark. Our tour of dark deaths is over, and the winner or perhaps the loser is clear. Being slowly cooked by Jupiter's radiation until your suit bursts is the absolute worst way to go. Space is beautiful, but it is not kind. It is a vast ocean of extremes, where the laws of science can become the cruelest executioners. So the next time you look up at the stars, remember this grim tour. And be thankful for the thick, safe blanket of Earth's atmosphere. What do you think? Did we get the ranking right? Is there a worse fate we missed? Thank you for joining us on this dark trip. If you enjoy content that looks at the dark and interesting side of science, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. Until next time, stay curious,